again everyone, how you doing? Hope you're keeping well. I know what you're going to say. You're going to say it's not April yet, it's still March. You're right, you're right, it is just about still March. But I'm going to do April's White Dwarfs a little bit early. And the reason I'm going to do April's White Dwarfs a little bit early is quite honestly, life is going to be absolutely manic this month. As you all know, probably, Salute is on the 22nd of April. It is a big deal, and I've got a lot of casting and a lot of setting up stuff to do for that. A lot of printing off things, a lot of packing things, sorting out the logistics and so forth. Added to which, obviously the Hobgoblins of the Black Waste Kickstarter did really well. Thanks guys for backing that. But with all these things, the better something does, the more work it entails this end as well. So it's a toss off between yes, this, thank you. It's great to have the support, it's great to have the money, but oh, I've got so much casting to do now. Anyway, so that we're good to go with that. We've got the molds, we've got everything that we need. Hopefully if you backed it, you've filled out your backers survey. If not, please go and do that so that we can pack your things, because I want to have those available for people to pick up at Salute, and also hopefully I'd like to have packs of Hobgoblins available for other people who didn't get to back it at Salute as well. So I want to have everything done and ready, but it means a very quick turnaround, so I'm going to have to take a few days off work in addition to Easter to do that, and it's going to be a lot of setup. So I'm probably not going to have an awful lot of time to be doing videos during April. Fair warning, we might not have a video during April. There might be one right at the end because I'll probably take one at Salute. You might see one of me packing for Salute, but we might not get to record anything. So I'm going to do White Dwarfs now while I've got a little bit of space before everything gets mental. And I have had a recent read through these, so let's start and have a flick through. And if you like what you see here today, here's the spiel, you know, here's the little thing. Eventually I'll get used to saying this and it won't be anything new, but it's still like, oh, the super, you know, professional thing to do. Like the video, leave us a comment, what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see more of. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notifications button so that you'll know when there's another video, which as I say might not be in April, but there will probably be one before too long. And head over to our other social media. We've got an Instagram account, got a Facebook account, and if you go to our website, oakbound.co.uk, there's a newsletter, and there'll be a newsletter coming out at the beginning of April in any case, so you'll get some more news and features and new releases and things through there. So yeah, that's a good read, and we try to have some game content in there as well, so it's not just a, you know, here's what we're selling this month thing. It's hope worth signing up for. So go over to oakbound.co.uk. The direct link is oakbound.co.uk/news, and you'll find our newsletter, The Acorn. Sign up for that. Meanwhile, let's crack on with some White Dwarfs. Okay, here we go. We're going to start off in 1985 for Mike, because Mike likes to watch the first part of the video and then he can switch off by the time we get to the 90s because he has no interest in it whatsoever. So Mike, especially for you, and not at all because it's the normal thing that we do, we're going to start off in 1985, and this is March 1985, issue 64. Should I put the issue in the title name? I don't bother usually, but maybe that would help people, I don't know. And I'm just going to have a look at this cover for a second, because look at this. Here's some barbarian guy. He's got slightly sort of leonine features. Is he like a lion man with this kind of organic looking but very obviously metal helmet and a big axe, and he's all very barbarian-y, fantasy, and then in the background there's this what looks like the nose cone of an airliner, but it's got lots of flames behind it, so I guess it's some kind of space shuttlecraft. Who knows? I don't know what this is. I don't know what this means. Maybe it's from something. If you know what it is, let me know what it's from. But I love this blend because it's a cover that immediately sparks your imagination and makes you think, what setting is this? What's going on in this picture? We've come in halfway through a story. What's going on here? And that's great for a role-playing magazine. That's really, really nice. Even if it doesn't explain it, you know, it's just it's nice to have that spark of creativity, that spark of imagination. And here we are in, as I say, in March 1985, and Ian Livingstone has been doing some LARPing. He's been running around Planet Photon, shooting people with laser guns, and thought it was very cool while he was over in the States, but isn't so keen perhaps on the kind of LARP things that are happening in the UK, so maybe he's going to bring his LARPing back with him to the United Kingdom, who knows. I'll say Laser Quest, yeah, brilliant, love a bit of Laser Quest. LARPing, not so much my thing. Here's another of these really odd background decisions that makes it really hard to read the text. Actually, this is more faded grey than it looks on the screen. I think it's a bit easier to read. So what's this? This is a look at government law and conflict in fantasy campaigns by John Smithers. Basically, why your setting is important, okay? He says, dungeons are all well and good, but explain why there's a dungeon. Explain why they're there. If they're traipsing across the wilderness, what's the kind of wilderness they're traipsing across? Who owns the land, if anyone owns the land? What kind of powers are active over it? If they go into a city, who's in charge of the city? Does it have autonomy? Is it part of a larger state? Who's looking after the law and order in that area? I mean, they're all fairly basic questions, and probably most GMs or world creators, world builders, won't need any guidance to know that, but we're talking maybe a while ago here, or we are talking a while ago here, and maybe people needed a bit more prompting, but also maybe people who are a bit new to role-playing needed to think a little bit about some of these questions, and it never hurts to be reminded. Here's an advert for the Star Trek game that was reviewed in the last episode. We'll probably come back to that in a minute. Here's Dave Langford being told that he's being too nice. He's been too nice about the books that he's got to review, but actually saying the reason for that is that he's been sent some good books. And his example of a good book in this instance is Terry Pratchett's The Colour of Magic. Here we are right at the beginning of Discworld. Some would say not the best Discworld novel, but nevertheless the start of something obviously and very much appreciated here by Dave Langford, and he's quite right. Obviously Terry Pratchett is one of my favourites, and like Fantastic Colour of Magic being very much parodies on the D&D world, and in fact drawn from the D&D games that Terry Pratchett himself either played in or led. I think he led them, so that was an example of setting very much coming out of a role-playing game, so it's very appropriate for it to be in here. And we're going to pick up on another one of those novels coming out of a D&D setting a bit later in this magazine. But yes, on the other hand, he's not so keen on some Asimov works that he has received. So there is a little bit of negativity in there for good measure. Here's how we get a look at the new very expensive RuneQuest box. Forget this is £30. Sorry, this is £40 rather, back in 1985, which is not an insignificant amount of money. And this is what you get: full colour maps and booklets and things. And it basically, this entire thing is given over to the new RuneQuest box, which obviously isn't the new RuneQuest box now, but looks quite nice. And then there's a little bit on a new Traveller book here that he was not so taken with. On the subject of Travellers, here's Travellers. Yeah, there's some song lyrics here to be sung to the tune of "It's Raining Men." Okay, good, nice taste there, maybe. Here we are with some Star Trek stuff. So this is Starfall, and this just says that it's a scenario for Star Trek role-playing, but it does say that it was written using first edition Star Trek rules, so I guess the official Star Trek RPG, but not the Starship Battles one that we've seen here. But obviously they've just released this, they're keen to advertise Star Trek, so they have got a Star Trek scenario in here. And I'm not a big fan of Star Trek, shock horror, but this was interesting because I really didn't have any kind of idea of what sort of storyline to expect. And this doesn't read like it has to be. Yes, it's set very much in Federation space, but it doesn't have to be a Star Trek scenario. You could port this over to something else very, very easily. The scenario itself is quite good, it's quite interesting. It has several different settings, several different stages through the story, which, you know, considering it's, what, 5 pages, and one of those pages is almost entirely maps, I'd say is quite a well-written scenario, because it takes you on quite a big journey in not too much space with plenty of ability to put your own things. And of course, this is Marcus L. Rowland, who is has been critiquing other people's scenarios previously, so you would expect him to come up with something good, and he has. And if you like Star Trek, I imagine that it's even better. Here's a weird gribbly beast from Essex. There you go, some kind of swamp beast. And some more Star Trek, because you just read this Star Trek article, so now, you know, you're interested in Star Trek. Well, here's a Star Trek game that we've produced. Oh, okay, yeah, maybe, it looks quite cool. Maybe, I'll think about it. Did we mention Star Trek? Here's a Star Trek scenario. Okay, I'll have a read through that. Oh yeah, now my mind is really in Star Trek. Now I'm thinking about how I could run this scenario. Oh, by the way, did you know we sell this Star Trek game? And there's some spacey bits in the scenario, so maybe it's compatible. Okay, good. Bit of marketing there. Who said that Games Workshop's White Dwarf as a catalogue only started in the 90s, eh? Thrud the Destroyer gets another episode. If you remember, in the previous edition, Thrud had rather wiped out all of the competition in the Halfling's Armpit for this particular mercenary job without intending to. Now our Mexican farmer types have got to try and convince Thrud that their village is worth saving, or rather that their village's oppressor is worth destroying. The oppressor is called the Black Current. Da, la, la. Excellent, very nice there. What does the Black Current have that might tempt Thrud? Well, he's got riches beyond imagination. Nah, not interested. But they did all of these horrible things to us. No, not interested. But he's got a harem of beautiful women. No, not interested. But in the cellars of the Black Current is some of the finest ales in the kingdom, which tempts Thrud to go off on a journey. But they are not going alone, for there are some more to join people. The mega villains here, some more superhero villaining. This is about giving some backgrounds to your villains so that they are not just blank faces. I heard a very interesting take on Marvel hero villains recently, which I won't bore you with here, but basically it's quite interesting that the whole Marvel franchise being sort of funded in part, or at least allowed to film with certain equipment by the US military, it has a particular kind of thrust. The villains are all sort of people with a just cause who've taken it too far, whereas the heroes are all trying to preserve the status quo come what may. And it's a very, when you think about it, it makes an awful lot of sense and makes me dislike Marvel even more than I do currently. Not many letters on the letters page today, but a little bit of discussion mostly on Fiend Factory and whether it should stay or whether it should go. Then we have the Dawn of Unlight, a MERP, an AD&D scenario set in Middle Earth. This is interesting. This is about cultists of Ungoliant trying to bring her spirit back into the world. It's a bit of a Tolkien fan. It's quite interesting to read, and I guess it works fairly well. It does feel very AD&D rather than necessarily very Tolkien-y, but again, there's quite a nice saga of events in there. Here's a bit more on ninjas, because we haven't seen enough of ninjas in the last year. This is ninjas in modern day. And here is Fiend Factory with another setting and some creatures by various people who sent them in that might inhabit the setting. And this is quite, I mean, the creatures are okay, they're interesting. The little sand cat here is cute. But the setting here actually is quite interesting. I would very happily read just 2-page article on this setting, and never mind the creatures that are here, giving them new profiles. They're not too dissimilar from other stuff that we've seen before, but yeah, the setting is interesting. Here we've got some stuff for Call of Cthulhu, so they're really mixing it up in this. We've got superheroes, we've got Middle-earth, we've got Traveller, we've got what else have we got? Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, really varied collection, which is good, because the letters previously had said too much Dream Quest, too much AD&D or D&D. Well, there you go. They are mixing it up. Here's that painting article again, and this week we are looking at professional figure painters. So this is some new releases, and they sent some away to some professional figure painters. And it name checks a few people, so if you're name checked in here, maybe get in touch. It'd be interesting to hear from you. The Asgard Dwarfs were released here, and I'm a big fan of these dwarves. This guy particularly, I mean, it's a shame he's got his back to us here with his dragon on his head, but I think this is one of the finest dwarf figures ever made. Professionally painted, and also lots of Call of Cthulhu creatures. And this little guy down the bottom here, a Citadel cleric that has undergone the tender ministrations of miniature masters of Southend-on-Sea, Essex, who they say is one of the finest miniature painting services available. Okay, I can see, knowing what some of Joe Diva's stuff was painted like, I can see why he might think that. I'm not a fan of this style. I don't think that's a particularly nicely painted miniature, but maybe it reads well on the tabletop. Who knows? We've also got this little early night goblin guy here, which is, he's interesting. He appears to have a beard and quite a pallid sort of gnomish face. He does look more like a gnomish character, but actually really suits him. Interesting take and paint job, especially as I think that was a sent off. Let me just have a look. Figure 7. One of Citadel Night Goblin's C13 range. No, okay, maybe it wasn't a professional painter. It talks about the flesh tones that were used on him. So, but this is before goblins were definitely green, right? Goblins used to be a myriad of colours before it became assumed they were green. Here are some spells for helping people out, for finding people in the wilderness, making sure they can find their way home, for letting people know how other people are before they have mobile phone technology, for bringing, giving some of your life to other people, just helpful, friendly spells. And here's that other book I was talking about that's based on an AD&D series. Interestingly, last month, one of my mates started running old Dragonlance modules at a local shop, and I was in for that one, and about to go for the second of those sessions playing through the Dragonlance. And I hadn't really done a lot of Dragonlance stuff, but I just was sort of vaguely aware of it. I read one book when I was a kid, but that is also a novelisation that's come straight out of people's experience of playing the Dragonlance modules. And we've got a rather fetching Larry Elmore cover, of course. Who else could it be? I don't remember them being terribly good novels, and the modules that we played they don't really stand out as anything particularly dramatic, but you may remember Dragonlance being the first sort of set of adventure modules that really stepped outside of the dungeon and gave you wildernessy things and gave you part of a bigger overarching storyline that the characters were a part of. And it feels a little bit forced at times maybe, but you've got to do some of that if you're trying to steer people along the storyline that you've plotted. So yes, it was groundbreaking, if not in hindsight particularly wonderful series that I believe it's come back, that they're bringing out again, or have already brought out some of it again for the latest edition of D&D, so that'll be why it's relevant currently. I spotted something here in the classifieds. I was having a skim down the classifieds earlier, and I saw an advert for Tudor armour that are in Ringwood in Hampshire, which is where my parents live, so just down the road. I never knew this existed, but obviously I was born in 1984, this is 1985, so I would have been 1 year old when this was posted, and I probably wouldn't have been aware of arms and armour at that point. Although, you know, it was not too long into my childhood before I became aware of it, but I don't know, I'll have to have a look and see if these guys, they probably aren't still around, but they may have lasted for a few years at least. And here are some of Tony Ackland's wonderful line drawings of pre-Slaughter miniatures, including, of course, the excellent pre-Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings range. I used to have Legolas on foot, I used to have Gimli on a pony, these Barrow Whites and the Lord of the Nazgul I still have as wraiths in my undead army. They're some of the finest wraiths ever sculpted. Excellent range, really lovely range. It's a bit harder to see quite how some of these figures would translate into miniatures, but I guess miniature photography, as we've seen from Tabletop Heroes, was in its infancy. But other people seem to have managed. You know, where's that? Essex, of all people, who are pretty awful at taking photos nowadays. They had, you know, you could see what they were. You could see what they were, even in the smiley little wolf here. But no, for some reason Citadel decided that Tony Ackland, maybe because the detail was much finer and it didn't show up very well. Anyway, so there we are. That is April 1985. Let's go to April 1995 with a very fine barbarian on the cover. And this is an exciting barbarian because this is, of course, the cover of Warhammer Quest. For yes, this is the edition where Warhammer Quest was unleashed upon the world, that excellent game system. I am in fact more of a fan of Advanced Hero Quest, but I can absolutely appreciate that Warhammer Quest has some much finer components in it, and we'll take a look at that. Here's an extract from the Ultramarines Codex. Rabut Guilliman, the patriarch of the Ultramarines, who has made such a big comeback in recent 40k years and is now, you know, King Smurf. Here's some of his early exploits and fluff, and some librarians. I think it's brilliant that space armies of the future need librarians. I think that's extremely insightful. Apothecaries. Here's how to build a basic strong point for 140k out of just some cornflakes packets, with templates in it. Love this. Love a bit of modelling encouragement. It actually looks half decent. I think I made one of these as you know, first steps in getting something on the battlefield. That's absolutely all you need, and it's pretty modular. You can create bigger structures, smaller structures, do what you like with them. There you go. Make some little 3.1s. Yeah, and it looks very effective on the battlefield, I would say. Well done White Dwarf, for encouraging people to make stuff out of found stuff rather than going out and buying plastic stuff. Here's the introduction to Warhammer Quest, that fine game system. It does acknowledge that there have been previous Dungeon Bashy games, but it also describes this as a new direction for the Warhammer world to go in. We're going to see in the coming episodes, because the Warhammer Quest thing in White Dwarf lingered for quite some time and was a thing that was very prominent throughout my early collecting of White Dwarfs. So I'm very excited to see this pop up and those things start to happen, and the crossover between Warhammer Quest and Fantasy Battle was something that I found particularly appealing. Never had this game for all of the £30 that it cost back in 1995. That's less than a copy of RuneQuest cost 10 years earlier. I mean, wow. For all of this stuff, for all of these miniatures. And I really like the plastic miniatures. I haven't got this Wood Elf guy. I'd still want him to lead my unit of archers in my Wood Elf army. I think the plastics of this era were very adventurous, actually, if you compare them to the earlier plastics. They were really taking the same principles that they were applying to Citadel miniatures a bit earlier, of trying to break that very static, he says, although this is a very static, you know, YMCA Gary Morley kind of pose, but trying to get some degree of dynamism into them, despite the fact that they're quite flat figures. And a lot of the figures obviously came out of the earlier regiment boxes to go into this game. But just look at these floor plans. I mean, I'm a big fan of the original Hero Quest and how realistic the floor plans look, and I still don't know who painted that. One of the things that I think Advanced Hero Quest is let down by is the more cartoony, basic sort of line work ground plans, but these are just glorious. It does annoy me slightly that in this photo the orcs are stood on the magical fountain in the middle. I mean, really, they should be stood around the magical fountain in the middle of the tile rather than ignoring it, but there you go. Hooray, Warhammer Quest. We then have some highlights from the previous Golden Demon, some announcements of the categories for the 95 competition, some inspiration to get your entries in, some more vouchers for store openings, St Albans and Wolverhampton. Were you there? What did you buy with your vouchers? And then a Titan Legions battle report, because they launched Tyranids in the previous issue. So of course we need to try out the Tyranids. So here's Tyranids versus Imperial forces. And it only lasts 3 turns, and it all seems to be going the Imperials' way until at the very last minute the Tyranids stomp in and seize the day. So there you go, the Tyranids won. Who'd have thought? The new creature that comes out wins the battle report, and I'm sure that's being all very cynical, and it was totally fairly fought, and not at all staged that the Tyranids should win in the final turn of the battle. But there you go, it makes for interesting reading, and also probably sold them a few Tyranids. What's also interesting here is that this is obviously, the format has been copied and pasted from a previous battle report, because down here we can see that the Imperials got 30 points and the Orcs got 47 points. I'm pretty sure that's not an Orc, pretty sure. But maybe the Orcs bailed in at the last minute and just helped them out and they just didn't write that bit. I don't know, anyway. Yeah, the Tyranids win. And we're in mail order again. And here are some Space Marines. And here are some Space Marines. Imperial Guard and Orcs. Chaos and that Ghost. That I had one of these. I never really liked this figure very much. Yeah, I was saying about the Wraiths, you know, the Ring Wraiths, not the Ring Wraiths, the Nazgul and the Barrow Whites in the previous, in the 1980s issue. Well, that was a good example of what a Ghost should look like, and this is not. But there you go. Empire Elect accounts. There's your Tyranids. And some Titans. Doesn't take nearly as long to go through here. Maybe next time I'll do this one. Sorry, Mike. Maybe next time I'll do this one first, and I'll see if I can spend a bit more time over this, because I always seem to spend a lot of time over the 80s one and not so much time over the 90s one. I think that's because there's a lot more to read in here. This is a lot more about looking at pictures, but as I say, we're soon coming into the White Dwarfs that I started collecting as a kid, so there will be lots of nostalgia, and I'm sure I will gush over this, and poor 1980s issue won't get a look in. But anyway, that's for the future. So enjoy the rest of your March and the rest of your April. and I will see you in May after Salute for some more White Dwarfs. Take care.